Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ripple.
Oh, hi, Chintan. You have also joined. Hi. I think we're talking after a long time.
Yeah, hi. Good to see you. Yeah, I guess almost a year.
I'm not able to hear you very clearly. I don't know if it's the problem at my end or.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, now you're audible.
All right. Yeah, I guess it's a year ago we spoke.
Yeah. What
Life.
of that? Yeah.
Great.
Okay, I think we can start now.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Good evening, Reena ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you and to hear you talking about quantum technologies and its current state. So just for the people who have joined us recently, I want to introduce Dr. Reena Dayal. She heads a quantum ecosystem initiative in India, and it's a NGO which is working to promote the quantum technologies in India. Currently, she is also heading the IEEE Special Committee on the Quantum Technologies from the India part. Apart from that, ma'am has very livid experience. She has worked with technologies and startups, and currently she is based out of Hyderabad. It's we are very glad, ma'am, that you are able to join us and then share your knowledge about us. We welcome you, and ma'am, if you can start sharing your knowledge. In between, I will ask questions based on the audience convenience and as per your convenience.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anshul. Thank you, Shada, for inviting me for this session. I had reached out and very quickly, you arranged for this. So very grateful for that. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the quantum ecosystem, both at a worldwide level and in India. And then I will go into the details of the hackathon that we are conducting, which is a slightly unique hackathon, because unlike most hackathons, it's not a 1 week or a 2 week event. We are basically, it's an incubation effort, and we launched this hackathon on the 15th of August, and it will be running till mid-November. Mid-November is when the final demo days are happening. And just a little bit of a background on QETCI itself. So it's a not-for-profit Section 8 company, which is focused on bringing industry, academia, government, various other associations in quantum together. And we are based on a membership-based approach, which means that, we are not, it's not essentially, while I hold a lot of influence as the chair for the Quantum Ecosystems and Technology Council of India, but essentially it's the combined aspirations of the members that is going to take our efforts forward. And so we are very, very committed to enable and accelerate the quantum ecosystem in India. Over the course of our, we've now in June we completed 1 year of operation. And in this 1 year we realized that while we focus on India, given the nature of this technology, it is extremely important that we are also looking very actively at international collaborations. And hence, the approach is very different. While we are focused on India, if you look at the hackathon, it is opened up to participants across the world. Although we are publicizing more in India because that is where we are operating in, but we have sort of opened it up across the world, and the mentors is also there from across the world. So there's a little bit of that ideology about, how does technology impact society and what all can we do to really ensure that this technology develops and is deployed in a manner which is most beneficial for the ecosystem, including people and society and so on. This is a long list of the kind of activities that we are likely to get involved in over a period of time. Of course, only 1 year of operation has passed, so we've sort of been involved in making recommendations for filling gaps and for enabling international collaboration. The identifying the most important use cases for India, bringing in a stronger focus for quantum security, post-quantum security in India, and then of course provide a collective voice to inform and recommend with the intent of influencing the Indian R&D investment. So we've sort of given very high level inputs till now. In fact, one of the things that we did very early on was to bring the focus on error correction, because there was very little focus. And today, if you see, there are several very premier colleges who are focusing on error correction, right? So I think getting that voice heard and making sure that we are moving in the right direction. Of course, as an independent entity. So we work very closely with the government, but we are an independent entity, and therefore we operate in that manner. As of now, we have Amazon Web Services, Microsoft India, and Reliance Jio platforms as our large voting members. So these are the entities who are more interested in influencing policy decisions, etc. And we have several individuals from across India who have joined in as individual members. The individual membership fee is just like peanuts. So if anybody is interested, join. And another good way to get a free membership is to participate in the hackathon and get shortlisted for the first round. So anybody who is shortlisted for the first round, we are just making you by default a member.
Appreciate it, ma'am. Just a quick question. So when we look at, there are different kind of technical hackathons happening across the world, like IBM, they do it quite frequently. So how different is this hackathon from those kinds of hackathons? Because I have seen a lot of unique details has gone into designing the hackathon, and then it's supporting the startup ecosystem in India, where we are just started taking the baby steps in this particular technology domain. So can you please elaborate a few more points about the hackathon first?
Yeah, sure. So the way we have designed this hackathon is first of all, we discovered few things. One is the number of startups in the last 1 year has gone from single digits to double digits, but it's still a very small number in quantum, right? The second is it's not bad considering in the last 1 year, at least 2 of our startups have made great progress in terms of getting international funding, getting government projects and so on, right? So I think considering where we started, it's a good step, but how do you accelerate this? In the last 1 year, we've also spoken to people who are, we've spoken to fund managers, VC fund managers who are investing in deep tech. And we've realized that that was early in the year itself, last year, when we realized that, there's a lot of education that is required. Since then, we've also been educating, talking to CXOs and educating on what this technology means. Also made presentations to a group of investors, explaining to them, how we should be looking at this technology and what are the checks and balances that can be brought in place, but still take a leap forward in what seems like a risky area to invest in. So one of the important things to understand here is that we also have an international advisory board in QuET Council of India, QETCI, and one of the members of our international advisory board actually is the managing director for a purely quantum focused fund, one of its kind in France, right? So we also have the benefit of understanding how this funding in quantum is working in various locations across the globe, and see how we can influence. So we, in fact, arranged for meetings for those people with some of the fund managers here in India. So there are 2 aspects for the startups. One is they need to have the right environment. There has to be some way of selling their products in India. And the second is, so how do you make the market ready? The second is, how do you get people excited about this area as an investor community? The third is, where is the skill development? So in the last 2-3 years, there have been a lot of programs, like, which are, on the software side, where we are encouraging people to, be able to code on different platforms. But those efforts are very good, but they take people up to a certain level and then it stops. What happens beyond that is that there is a catch-22 situation from a skill development perspective. What happens is, let's say if you look at somebody who has gained certain amount of proficiency in working on these applications or algorithms, but they don't have any real experience to show, then companies are hesitant to hire them, because it's not as if they have 100 posts available. They have a few posts, job openings that are coming up, and they want to be very picky and choose very carefully. So it's a chicken and egg situation. Where do you get the experience, and where do you how do you get the right people, right? In this sea of people, on one hand, and then no past experience in India, at least, right? I mean, mostly either research experience or that's it. So we looked at all of these factors, and we realized that a standard hackathon, first of all, most of the hackathons, almost all the hackathons that have happened around the world, in fact, have been hackathons which are driven by the industry, by one single company, and they are largely focused on the platform of the company.
Right.
So in our case, the first difference is that this is not based on one single company. You can actually register any idea into the hackathon, and you could be working on any platform. The only limitation from our side is, so we accept entries on any platform. The only thing is that we have mentors only for Amazon Web, Bracket, and Microsoft Azure Quantum, primarily because these are two sponsors we were able to get. And so they're providing mentors and to support that effort. But if you're working on Qiskit, or you're working on Google Circuit or any other platforms, you're very, very welcome to come and submit. The second difference in this hackathon is that if we realize that 1 week or 2 weeks, we will not get anything. We're treating it like a startup incubation effort. So anybody who gets shortlisted and moves to the second phase, we have a group of international mentors, national and international level mentors, who are there both from the technology perspective, from a business domain perspective. So there are folks from BBVA Bank in Spain. There are 3 mentors from there. Although BBVA has not come in as a formal sponsor, these 3 folks are very, very interested in quantum. And in fact, today we have uploaded on the website a lot of references of financial services use cases, right, for people to consider as they decide what problems they want to crack. So similarly, we have Apollo Hospitals, who's come in as the healthcare with an interest in healthcare, and see how quantum will impact healthcare and so on. So with all of these groups of mentors, let's say you are somebody who's passionate about quantum, you wanted to start a startup, right? And I've had people come to me and say, we don't know where to start. So this is the opportunity for you to start. Because not only, you just have to bring the idea first and have some clarity in your mind, get some team members with you. But the moment we move to the next stage, we have platforms available for you. We have mentors available for you, and you have a full month to actually create a proof of concept or a prototype. And once you have created that, there are business mentors also who are there, startup mentors who will help you hone your pitch. And then while we will do an evaluation, and we have some very interesting prizes, not just cash prizes. So there are cash prizes for the top 3 winners. But apart from that, 2 of these, all these, the shortlisted projects, like the final shortlist, they will get an opportunity to be part of a demo day, where there will be a group of investors who will be participating in the demo day. So we are essentially looking at investors who are interested in providing pre-seed and seed funding, right? Very early stage where you've just got a great idea, but you're at the pre-seed phase, right? So we have 2 partners, T-Hub, which is one of the largest incubators. It is the largest incubator in India, one of the largest in Asia Pacific. And then we have Incubate Ventures, which is known for doing pre-seed and seed funding for quantum startups, right? So they are part of this, they are partnering with us on this. So that is the second opportunity. The third opportunity is that 2 of these projects, let's say, will get an opportunity to present again in a conference in April 2023 happening in Singapore, which is the Quantum Tech conference, APAC conference, right? So they get to, they can get wider exposure there and, possibly look at additional funding. Not only this, everybody's final objective is not to run a startup. So all those people who are not interested in running a startup, but are interested in taking the project forward, we are planning an open source project in partnership with IEEE. And we are also talking to World Economic Forum to see if we can tie this to some of the governance principles that, I was part of the governance principles that were formulated by World Economic Forum for quantum. And so we are right now talking to them to see if that can be a joint effort. And we can create this open source, open quantum initiative where we are focusing on industry use cases, right? That can become a longer term thing for people to continue to work on, hone their skills, learn from the community, do something productive, and actually for companies to look at, start supporting these code bases and seeing if they want to, take some stuff out and start commercializing it and so on. So the, while it will be an open source model, it is people can, the kind of model will, gravitate towards is where people can continue to contribute to the code, but they can go ahead and, use it, license it in certain formats, right? So that is the additional opportunity that we are looking at for providing to the folks. All of the people who get shortlisted to phase 2, as individuals, they'll all get QETCI membership free of cost. There is also, in fact, we have some nice incentives for the mentors as well. And so this is how this program, is very different from a normal hackathon. I hope I answered your question, and I hope it was clear enough for everyone.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, I was mesmerized by looking at so much opportunities that has been provided by QET Council of India. Ma'am, just a quick question. So, let's say a layman, a person who has just entered into this particular technology part right now. So how they can start their journey? So, hackathon, it sounds very wonderful. And I believe some experience is required to compete in the hackathon, right? But as a fresher, if someone wants to start the journey in the quantum world, how they can do it, especially in the Indian context, per se?
So here the assumption is, today, if you look at the quantum ecosystem in India or even outside, and even folks like this group, right, the Quantum India group, we've been conducting so many basic sessions, right? So these are the people that we are targeting. We've been doing awareness sessions. You've been doing awareness sessions. Companies individually have been doing awareness sessions. Right now, our target definitely is not a completely fresh person who has no knowledge of quantum. They just heard the word quantum and they jumped in. That is going to be very difficult to support for this initiative.
What did they do with you?
So that's not a target audience right now. But I would encourage people like that, because this is not going to be the first hackathon. These things will continue. So people should, if they're interested in quantum at any point in time, they should make it a point to join a group like this and attend some of these sessions that are happening and bring their skills at least to a level where they know what the platforms are and how to code on at least one platform, even not very well, just at least know about it, right? So that's what I would recommend. And just a minute, maybe
Sure.
I'm going to share the website so that people know what I'm talking about for the hackathon, so that we close the hackathon part of the conversation.
We have, so Yadav has shared the website in the chat, ma'am. It's Quantum Science and Technology Hackathon 2022.hackerearth.com, right?
Yes, that is there.
Yes, ma'am. So we have shared it with everyone.
Okay, I just wanted to share some details here.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So this is, till September 15th, you can submit your ideas. That's the deadline, right? And if you please go ahead and submit. And the other thing is, we have a resource center. So a lot of information is getting populated on a daily basis here. So, and today, there is some stuff that got uploaded. We've been doing case study. use case sessions. There's another use case session coming up on next Monday. So a lot of ways we are trying to enable people. And then, of course, the rest of the details are here. I'll stop sharing. I think you have the link and you can use that. I'll go back to my PPT.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Do you want? Should I proceed, or you want to bring in
just a very simple question, ma'am. So we at QCI were very curious, like how you have started your quantum journey, because we would just like if you can shed some light. And in fact, I know that you have a lot of achievements which is not there on LinkedIn as well. But if you can just share how you have started and gradually progressed towards establishing QTC and Council of India as one of the leading council quantum ecosystem in India, that will be really inspiring for us.
Sure. So it's a very non-traditional journey in that sense, because I am an engineer. I'm not a physicist, right? But for several years, last several years, it's almost as if I was preparing for this role, because I suddenly got interested in, I used to be a physics enthusiast even when I was studying. I just took up engineering because that seemed like the best thing to do at that time. And then so much later in my career, on the side, I used to read these physics books because I was very interested in string theory, understanding how the universe works. So I've read a fair amount of very deep stuff on string theory, quantum physics, particle physics, because all of this is interrelated, cosmology, and some philosophy, right? Because all these subjects are pretty intertwined. And I remember when I used to talk about this, some of my friends used to actually laugh and say, what will you do? Why are you reading all this stuff? I said, I just, this is interesting and helps me understand at a deeper level where we are in terms of understanding this universe and understanding. And I have a fairly good idea, right? I mean, I can probably talk about each of these topics, have a conversation with any physicist, as long as they don't go deep into the mathematical calculations. But at a conceptual, theoretical level, I can have probably reasonably deep conversations in all of these topics. I don't have a PhD in physics, though. All right. And then what happened was that when I was in Microsoft, and of course, a few years ago, there was this, Microsoft announced this Q-Sharp platform. It was about to announce it, and I got interested in quantum, in that platform, and I decided to start a community in India, because I realized that there was absolutely zero conversation happening on quantum in India, right? When I started doing that, I actually ended up working with IIT Roorkee and IIIT Hyderabad to get pool electives, full credit courses set up for quantum computing in both of these institutes, and getting some folks from the company and myself going there and teaching there, so that along with the professors, so that the course could take off, and providing them the material and things like that. Very soon after that, a lot of professors started reaching out saying that, that's working well, and why can't you do it for us? So that was not a scalable model, because, it's like teaching a full course and you can't do it at 20 places, right? So what we decided to do at that time was to do a train-the-trainer program. And we actually trained a few hundred faculty from across India over 2 weeks to get them off the ground as to how they will take that forward. Last year, when I was looking at the ecosystem, so I was engaged in the ecosystem even before QETCI. And then last year, the beginning of the year, I realized that if we need to accelerate the ecosystem, there is a need for a private entity, which we decided, I got a couple of co-founders. So Ramesh Ketharaju, who's from Wells Fargo, and Professor Arun Pati, who's pretty well-known name in quantum. They are co-founders. So 3 of us are co-founders for QETCI. And I decided to leave my, I had left Microsoft, and I was thinking, and I realized, I felt that this is the time for doing this in India, because we need to. So there are two reasons. Fundamentally, today, if you look at economic progress that is happening in nations around the world, it's extremely important for every country who wants to be present as a reasonably powerful entity, right? And actually have a say in the international arena. They have to invest in quantum, right? And not only invest, they have to actually take quantum very seriously. So that was one fundamental thing that was driving me, saying that India should be there. And then the second thing was that we realized that, of course, let the government do its efforts. There is special value. There is definitely value of an independent entity, supporting all those efforts, as well as initiating, getting the market ready, initiating some initiatives which will move things forward, break the status quo. If you leave things be, it's not as if things won't happen. It may take 10 years. We just want to, we don't have patience. We want that to happen in 2 years instead of 10 years. So that is the aim, right? And so basically, I I left a very, very high paying job in the corporate sector to do this. And I've never been, I think we're moving in the right direction. So there's a lot of satisfaction to see things move forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Looking forward to your knowledge sharing PPT.
All right, thank you. So a lot of people ask, right, why quantum? And I think the reason is very clear. We've come, the entire history of our computing is, computing by itself, right, is pretty old. But the classical computing that we know today, the computers that we see around us, the devices that we carry with us, all of them are based on semiconductor technology derived from classical physics, right? And so and then all of that is relatively new, and then it has been moving at a phenomenal pace. From the early mainframes to the devices that we see today, right? I think the form factors have reduced tremendously. But at the same time, compute capacity has increased, and this has been following Moore's law, right? And things have been pretty hunky-dory, pretty good for everyone. Now we've reached a stage where the devices are so small, and the sizes at which we are talking about computation to happen in the semiconductor devices, it has reached a stage where the noise has become too much, and there is too much effort to be put in. We now have 1 nanometer, which we might see, we might see 1 nanometer technology. There are some alternate technologies around 3-dimensional circuits, etc., which are very useful in certain scenarios and so on. But what after that? What do you do after that? After that, we start getting into distances which are anyway getting into the quantum realm. And what happens is that we know for a fact that quantum physics, at those distances, the physical properties of and behavior of particles changes completely. It is not like classical computing. So what is the alternate? What is a long-term alternate for computing as we move forward is the question that has been there with scientists. And of course, there are many areas where, there has been a lot of research that has been happening, including neuromorphic computing, which IBM has been a big proponent for that. And there has been, it's not an area which has been abandoned, by the way. There is a lot of progress happening in that space as well. And then people started looking at molecular electronics and chemical computing, quantum computing, DNA-based computing, artificial organic brain or wetware computing, which is pretty exotic, like trying to take organic systems working along with silicon systems and see how those could be an alternate for computing. Now today we know today neuromorphic computing, there is progress happening. People are still investing in that space. There is some efforts going on in molecular electronics and chemical-based computing, but by far the most promising computing paradigm that seems to be there is quantum computing. Now, DNA computing is been found to be very suitable for long-term storage, right? And not so much for compute. And therefore, it's not as if it doesn't have a place, but for all practical purposes, it is quantum computing that everybody is investing in. Oh, sorry. going back. And what is quantum computing? I mean, I don't know if I need to cover all of these basics. Usually I cover that, but this seems to be a group which is already part of the Quantum India. So I can skip over what basically quantum is, or should I go through this?
Ma'am, you can go into some details, I believe.
All right, okay. So, when we look at the behavior of particles, and look at quantum behavior, it is not similar to a classical behavior. How is it different? So, we have to look at, if you've studied physics in high school, then you would remember knowing about the double slit experiment, right? And we know that we're talking about particles. So first of all, anything that we call as a particle is also a wave, right? So there is duality of matter at that level, and there is duality of energy and mass, right? So these are synonymous. You can either, if it's a particle, it has mass. If it is a wave, it has representing energy, and these are interchangeable in certain senses. This is true for whether we're talking about an electron, and we are looking at its spin, or whether we are looking at a photon and its polarization. And the reason I'm jumping directly to the electron spin or the polarization of a photon is because these two are, examples of, things that are used at the physical layer to create the basis of a quantum computer, for example. So if you're looking at a photonics-based system, we are dealing with the spin, the polarization of the photon, and a spin of the electron is one of the way to assign a value to a qubit, right? And we'll come to what qubit is. So we are looking in the quantum space. We are no longer dealing with real numbers. We're looking at complex numbers. We know that if we take the spin of an electron, for example, and we decide, we look at a state. Let's say the electron is spinning upwards. This could be one state, and it is spinning like this. It could be another state. But there is also another state of superposition in the quantum realm, where it is actually in all possible states at the same time. And when we want to leverage this in compute, we decide what our base states are going to be. And those base states are derived from what we understand so well in the classical computing area. We look at 0 and 1, or a binary system, right? So you look at those, it is defined two states, which are base states, which are 0 and 1. And then there is this state of superposition, which represents all the possible states. In the physical system, at the qubit level, we are talking about a superposition of 0 or 1, or those two basic states, right? From locality to non-locality, so there is a very, very interesting feature at the quantum level. There are two particles that are entangled in some form. Then even if you separate these particles very far from each other, then the state change in one of the particles is directly reflected in a state change of the other. And if you find that weird, then don't worry. You are in esteemed company, because Einstein found it very weird. He called it spooky action at distance, and it takes a while to wrap your head around it. A very important thing when you get carried, when you start questioning as to what is this, right? You must remind yourself that the state of quantum physics or fundamental physics right now is that there are many aspects which we know for true, but we do not know why they are true. So you are not the only one. Today, if you go and ask...
I have one question here.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So this Dimple, I have one question. Like we are talking about photons. So we all know that, it behaves in a different way when we are watching them. But when we are not watching them, it behaves in a different way. What is generally we read about photons?
Yeah, so I think quantum behavior says you're talking about another important point. The point is that let's say we're looking at the polarization of a photon or a spin of an electron. The state of superposition is valid only until an observer is not present. The moment there is an observer present, and a good way to look at it in the computing sense is to say when you do the measurement, right? Because then as an observer, you are trying to figure out what the value is. The moment you do a measurement, the states collapse into one of the classical states. And that is what you measure. And which state it will collapse to is determined by the probability function, which defines the particular entity that you are and its state, which you are measuring. So very important thing is that we are talking about, we are not looking at deterministic laws any longer. We are looking at probabilistic laws, which is the fourth point in this slide. I hope that answers your question, Dimple.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. And then from certainty to uncertainty. So today, for example, if you want to, I give this very stupid example all the time. Let's say if you want to sum up a certain number of numbers, integers. So X number of integers, if you sum up in a certain or a deterministic system, you will always get the same result, right? But when you use a probabilistic system, where there is, and it is probabilistic because there is uncertainty, and you want to calculate this, use that system to calculate the sum by attributing it to qubits, you're going to get a probabilistic answer, which means that if you do certain number of iterations and take the average of that this thing, you will get an approximate answer. Which is why today all solutions that we are trying to use, trying to develop, are always hybrid solutions, which means except for very special on the device systems, right? Like when you're talking about sensors, etc., which could be completely quantum in nature. But today, if you're writing any code, you would be actually making some calls to a classical system and some calls to a quantum system. And that is very, very desirable also, because there is another aspect. When we assign variables, for example, in classical systems, right, you can very easily say X is equal to some value, which is being picked up from somewhere. And then you can say Y is equal to X very easily, right? But in quantum, if this is representing a qubit, and if you do Y is equal to X, you've done a measurement. And the moment you do a measurement, your computation, your quantum algorithm, which is relying on superposition, stops midway, and your computation is incomplete, right? So I think there is an advantage in actually having doing this coding in a manner where you are, dealing with the hybrid environment, right? And that is there to stay for some time unless we discover some very unique things and we get very scalable quantum computers, and then you can average out stuff so well that you don't need classical systems. That is not going to happen very soon. And I think for as far as I can see right now, we're going to continue to use both classical and quantum computers until we arrive at a stage where there are scalable quantum computers, and then we may discover some things which we don't know now, right? Therefore, state after that is a little questionable, right, as to where we will proceed.
Just a quick question related to the current state of quantum technology in India. So, like when we say India is a superpower in the software side of the technology, but there is a lot of investment and the research going on the hardware part of quantum computing. Can you just share your views, like where are we standing, and how can we take it forward in this particular interesting area?
Sure. So 2 years ago, the Indian government made an announcement of a quantum mission, which is going to be worth 1.2 billion USD worth of investment, right? And recently, our principal scientific advisor, in a couple of forums, and one of them was an alumni event for IIT Delhi, he talked about the fact that things are moving forward, and very soon we will see the launch of the quantum mission. But does that mean that things have not been happening? No, a lot of things have been happening. First of all, we've had some very, very bright scientists working on theoretical physics, both on cosmology, string theory, and quantum physics in India, in the Harish Chandra Institute in Allahabad, right? And it was, for me, it was a revelation, right? And I felt ashamed of the fact that until I started looking for the information a few years ago, I did not know that there were such prominent scientists in India, right? And they are world recognized. And so theoretical work has been happening. Apart from, if you look across the country, even before this second quantum revolution started, there have been a lot of people who've been focusing on the theoretical side. We also had people focusing on the experimental side, for example, in Raman Research Institute and IIC Bangalore, right? So, and IIIT Hyderabad on the theoretical side, right? So these are some of the places where work was already happening. What has happened in the last 2 years? So the government launched a program called the QuEST program, which was completely focused on research and academics. And there was funding which was assigned based on that a couple of years back to a lot of institutes across India. And many of them have made a lot of progress. And this is not just in the hardware space, it is in different, some is computing, some is communications. All of you must have heard, about the progress that was made in quantum communications by Raman Research Institute and ISRO, right? And the work that is happening on satellite communication. So I think things have moved forward. We also have a startup called international level startup, internationally recognized startup called QNU Labs, which is working on QKD solutions. And very recently, there was an announcement by the Indian Army about, creating, going ahead with purchasing those kind of solutions after having evaluated QNU Labs and products and so on, right? So I think those were, that's the amount, the kind of progress that has happened in that space. Also as part of the, there's a program of National Cyber Physical Systems. As part of that, there are centers of excellence which have been created by the government across, affiliated with some academic institute across India. And the IISCR Pune has been assigned as the Center of Excellence for Quantum. And they have been given a budget and they have been focusing on that and multiple areas of research that they're working on, right? So I think there has been progress on that front as well. If you look at the industry, if you look at the standards bodies, right, because the conversations on quantum communication have started at ITU and ITU level, which is International Telecommunications Union, and so on, we have a standard development body for telecom in India called the Telecom Standard Development Society of India. And they have started looking, they have got interested in quantum and they have started creating a working group for that as well. So I think QETCI, we have started some efforts, very early stages, to look at, actively participate through our members and then rope in all our members to participate on standards in the compute and application spaces, right? So that is the focus that is there. Many of the system integrators in India, they have all actively started looking at quantum and at different stages of, forming teams or focusing on POCs, proof of concepts and stuff like that. So I think we are a very, very, I would say that in the last 1 year, 2 years, there has been a lot of progress and things are moving in the right direction in the ecosystem is how I would put it.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing the information with us. I think one of the participants, Mr. Jayant Mahajan, wants to ask some question.
Sure.
Can you please go ahead?
Good evening, ma'am. This is Jayant here. So, I was quite intrigued by the previous slide that you just showed, where we have different computing paradigms. So we have DNA computing and we have quantum computing, and there's a whole list out there. So, I've always been wondering, so quantum computing, there's quite some excitement, which we can see around this technology. However, not many people talk about the other computing paradigms. So I have a two-part question here. So like one part is like, so I was wondering, why is that so? That's one question. And second is, so in your opinion, do you see like, for example, quantum computing probably developing as a server, it will more developing as a computing technology, and maybe DNA computing as you said, long-term storage. So I probably see a lot of storage shifting to DNA. So I have quantum and DNA talking to each other for different purposes. So do you see that happening at any point in time?
Yeah, it depends on how things evolve. So the reason why I showed that slide is because, if you don't pay attention, it seems like, there was classical computing and then somehow everybody decided we should work on quantum computing. The scientific community doesn't work like that. So before you and I get to know about it, I mean, if we think of ourselves as, general purpose consumers or just IT professionals, a lot before that, there is a lot of research happened. Scientists start exploring, and these could be technical scientists working with companies or even in the academia, who start exploring and say, so the conversation on, hey, where is Moore's law going to lead us and what do we do after that, started happening in the semiconductor industry more than a couple of decades ago, right? And I think there are different people who started focusing on different technologies because there seemed to be some benefit. So this is essential science research that started off, and then some people started, focusing on some of these technologies and discovering new things, and there's some progress that has happened. The reason why you hear about quantum computing is obviously because the rest of them are not have not been able to give the same kind of promise that quantum has given us as as a compute technology, right? Or a communication technology, as a holistic technology that can meet all our computing needs, because communication is also linked to computing, right? I mean, you have computers, you link them to communicate, right? And there has to be some sort of leverage that you have one to the other. Now, some of these technologies have shown some interesting results, which means there is a possibility that they could be used in a very specific format for very specific solutions. Like you give the example of DNA computing. Will that mean that all storage will shift to DNA computing? No, that is unlikely to happen. But can it be one of the technology formats? Let's say you want to create something which is going to let's make a fantastic assumption, right? Some million years or some thousands of years into the future, there's a catastrophe going to happen. There is a danger of the human race getting wiped out, right? And so you want to leave behind a legacy, right? You don't want to disappear as a race. You want to leave the information for somebody to find. Or if you want to send a capsule out to space and you're really looking for storage to be available, and you also want to send some information for all kinds of, then you might need different kinds of storage formats in which data is put in, because who knows, if there are aliens out there, how do they decipher, why do you assume that the way we look at computing, they will look at computing? And to understand what I'm saying, you have to realize that everything is based on human imagination. The fact that we think that a binary system with 0 and 1 is the best form of computing for decades, right? For almost 100 years, is something which is an invention by the human mind, right? It is quite possible that if you wipe this information out and somebody who doesn't have this knowledge is asked to devise a computing system, they may come up with something completely different, right? So I think, and then quantum computing is a good example, right? Because it is completely different in its essence. However, the way we are treating it right now also is very closely derived from the binary, this concept of bit of 0 and 1. And, that's because that's something which we have learned. We don't want to throw it away, and we want to move forward in a manner where there is integration with legacy systems, and it's easier for the transformations to happen and so on, right? So there is merit in considering all these alternate technologies, and there might be very different kinds of uses that we might derived from them. Don't ask me to go into details of each specific one of them. We don't have a time, and I may not be the right person, for example, to talk about molecular electronics. So.
Great, thank you. Actually, you just triggered a whole thought process for my next science fiction novel, probably. Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, I mean, I don't think I talked about any science fiction, but yeah, I'm sure. Please go ahead and write a science fiction novel. There's a dearth of those in India.
Ma'am, we have a couple of queries from more participants. So I would invite Akshay to ask the next question.
Hello, ma'am. So,
Yes, Akshay.
what are your thoughts on bridging the industry academia gap? And talking about the research part in India, there's a lot of conservatism as to who are admitted into high-end labs. Suppose there's something called as clean room where semiconductor devices are fabricated and the access is usually restricted to people who are doing their masters and PhDs. But the same is not the case when we talk about undergraduate research in US institutes. They're very welcome, and people from diverse background come together and to realize their structures, which I'm not able to see at any of the high-end labs in India. So, what are your thoughts on breaking this conventional process?
So I think it's a paucity of resources which creates these restrictions, right? I mean, I'm hoping that as we're moving forward and as as more and more investments are going to happen, once we have the announcement on the National Quantum Mission, I'm sure more resources will be available in some form, various forms, to different entities, and then the scenario will gradually change. But those observations are correct. It is linked to positive resources, focus on some of these areas being newer, and and then if you have limited resources, you want to give it, let the people who are doing research, which can also advance things forward to do it, and undergrads therefore get left out, right? So it's just a function of that, and this will definitely change as we move forward.
Thank you, ma'am. So I got something contradictory to say. Yeah, earlier stated that semiconductor devices came out of our understanding of classical physics, right? But that is not quite true. It came out of as a result of our understanding of quantum mechanics, is what I'd like to add.
I didn't understand that. Could you repeat that, Akshay?
Ma'am, as you earlier stated that the understanding and development of semiconductor devices is linked to our understanding of classical physics, right? That's not quite true, and it's linked to our understanding of quantum mechanics, which led to the development of transistors.
And could you explain that how?
Okay, so there are these mechanisms why semiconductors were chosen to form transistors, and the most generic form to put out this is the is the transistor acting as a switch, and the perfect one would be.
You're talking about electron tunneling, right?
Not exactly kind of electron tunneling, but the origin of band gap themselves and the motion of electrons through the crystal.
Yeah. So electron behavior, yes, to some extent, it captures the aspects of what happens, how electrons behave because of the particles, the kind of particles they are, and the distances that they operate in. But I don't think anybody was really thinking that we are, using quantum behavior to do that. It is still very much based on classical concepts, and just the tunneling concept is used to, sort of leverage. The tunneling concept is leveraged in classical computing. But beyond that, everything else is based on classical physics, right? In terms of how we deal with this system. When we're talking about quantum behaviors, I think it's only in quantum computing that we are looking at quantum behaviors, leveraging that, looking at quantum, creating algorithms that can leverage that behavior for us to give exponential benefits in computing, right? So that's the difference. Yeah, I mean,
yes,
if you really
there's something known as aging mechanisms in semiconductor devices.
Ma'am, I think that's a very interesting discussion that's going on. But however, in the interest of the time, can we go ahead to the next participant?
Sure, we can take the discussion offline, Akshay. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll back up.
Yeah. Next, we have Ashwini who wants to ask the question. Ashwini, can you please unmute yourself and then ask?
I think they're not able to unmute themselves.
Yeah, I'll just check. Yeah, I think Ashwini is now. Not a problem. Maybe, if Ashwini can type the question in the chat box, we can take it from there. Ma'am, you can please go ahead with your presentation.
All right.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, yes, you are.
Sorry, my browser was behaving weird. Okay, we know that error correction is one of the major problems today that is preventing quantum computers from becoming large scale, so to say. So I have two-pronged question. First is what other problems do you think we should be working upon for large scale quantum adoption, quantum computer adoption? And second question would be, what are current interesting research that you find in India going on in quantum error correction?
Okay, error correction is a vast topic. I don't think we can cover this in this discussion. But error correction is the presence of errors, and anything that what we really need to work on is not just error correction, but error prevention. So how can you keep the error rate low because of the choice of materials that you make, or the way you design the system, etc., is one part of the story. And the second is, after you do that, how do you bring in redundancy by allocating number of hardware qubits to number of software qubits? What is the ratio that you're going to use? And then what algorithms that can you use on top of that? So there are a whole series of steps involved in error correction. And while we must remember that prevention is also a part of that conversation, or part of that whole exercise. So there are, which solution, what is going to work is all dependent on what is the underlying physical system that you are building. If you're working on a semiconductor-based, electron spin-based, or you're working on like IonQ, you have systems which are based on ions, and then, or you have a diamond NV center-based technology, or you have a photonic-based technology. The conversation completely changes, and I'm not an expert on error correction to be able to comment on what is the technology, what are the algorithms or mechanisms used for each of these different systems. They're very specialized systems, people who work on that. And then, of course, progress is happening. Every few days we hear of some progress happened in one kind of system versus another kind. So we have to just wait and watch. And of course, some systems seem to have more promise than the others. If you look at photonic-based systems, the issue is not so much about errors. The issue is more about, it's very difficult to entangle single photons, right? And how do you scale that up? So it is not just the error correction problem, depending on, because in photons don't interact with the environment as much, right? I mean, that's why we are able to get light from stars, which are billions of years away. Because, photons just pass through the medium and you're able to see, so it's not so much an issue of error correction as much as there is an issue of scalability because of the challenges in entangling single photons, right? I think that is the challenge there. So scalability, two kinds of issues are there. And that reminds me, I was telling somebody this recently, and I missed out on this part. So every time we have a conversation, some things you forget and something you remember. Yeah, so that's the whole thing for error correction.
Do you think, do you find anything interesting, specifically in India, or interesting happening in error correction or other problems?
So what is the motivation for that question?
Actually, what I was thinking, I was thinking of some problems which I can deep dive further apart from error correction and what's happening. So yeah, that's where I'm going from.
There are a lot of academicians who are focusing on it. I recently connected with somebody in IIT Chennai who was doing some work in that space. But there are also people in IICR Pune and IIC Bangalore who are focusing on this. Everybody is working on a different approach. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Ma'am, there's one more question from Dimple. So it's more on the application side of the QC. she's asking, how do quantum computing see metaverse? Is it positive or negative? In fact, we had a lot of chatter on how fintech and metaverse and cryptocurrencies, blockchain, these technologies are going to be affected with the advent of quantum computing. So if you can just throw some light on this particular aspect, it will be really beneficial for the audience over here.
Sure. I think the primary area of concern for all of these systems with respect to quantum is security, right? So if you look at a blockchain systems, there is, of course, it's a distributed system. There is some sense of distributed ownership. But then, and when you talk about distributed ownership, you're relying on the security of the system a lot, right? Because decisions will be taken by multiple nodes. So identity and security become very important aspects in a blockchain environment. The security aspect is because it uses current algorithms like RSA and some hash-based algorithms. And these are likely to be broken by quantum computers. And hence the concern is more about how do you move these blockchain systems to be secure in a quantum era, right? And I think that's one main concern. Same is true for metaverse. When the moment we talk about a virtual world, privacy, security, all of this becomes very, very important, right? When we shop online, the transition from buying stuff in physical shops, where you can see and you can swipe your card and nothing stays there, right? You just walk away with your stuff. And buying online, that itself was a big leap. Now, when we talk about the metaverse, of course, there'll be commercial transactions on the metaverse, but we're also talking about social interactions on the metaverse. And we already saw, and so identity, privacy, all of those things, and security, everything becomes important in the metaverse. So that concern again comes in from the quantum perspective. Of course, there are other concerns around the metaverse which have got nothing to do with quantum. So I'll not go into details of that, but there are so many other concerns about the metaverse.
Thank you, ma'am. You can go ahead with the PPT, I guess.
Yeah. So I wanted to use this slide, because there's very little time. So I want to give you an idea of the scale of quantum computing and why is it so different. So when we look at n qubits, n bits, we are talking about that it can store any value between 0 and 2 to the power n. And because of the concept of superposition, when we look at n qubits, we're talking about storing all the numbers in those n qubits between 0 and 10 2 to the power n. Which means that if you have 1,000 qubits, we're talking about 1.07 into 10 to the power 301, which is a centillion qubits. And this number is larger than the number of known stars in the universe, right? And just 1,000 qubits, right? So imagine if you have error-free 1,000 qubits, there's a lot of scalability that you have in terms of computational capacity and storage and stuff like that. But the scales are really going to change as we move forward in quantum, and understanding this is a good way to understanding this. What does it mean in terms of applications? Of course, I have a few slides on that, but before that, we have quantum communications, quantum annealers, like companies like D-Wave have hardware annealers, which is specific hardware for some sort of solutions, mostly optimization problems being solved by those annealers, and then of course, quantum sensors. This is a slide I borrowed from the QETCI website, but it gives a wonderful example about how investments are happening all around the world. Look at the number of countries who are investing, and look at the value that we are talking about in each of these cases, right? We're talking about a big, very, very big sums, including the India quantum mission, which is supposed to be 1.2 billion USD worth of investment, right? This is the, again, it is borrowed from, where is the acknowledgement? Just a second. So if you see the slide, there is acknowledgement.
I believe this is BCG analysis, ma'am.
Yeah, so these are the various kinds of reports that, from which this has been derived. But there's an acknowledgement at the bottom of the page, I think, which is missing here. So excuse me for that. But this is showing all the various companies, right, which are across the various services. So there are hardware-focused companies, there are systems level work companies that are there, system software layer, and then services companies. And of course, there are very specialized companies that are coming up in each of these areas. What is missing in this diagram is because it takes a computing snapshot. What is missing is, for example, the fact that there are close to a dozen or more startups today in this world which are focusing, which are trying to work in the area of drug discovery, for example, right? So using quantum. So I think there are these very, very specialized and niche companies also that are coming up, which are not covered in the basic computational approach. These are the top patenting countries of issuance for quantum technology patents, right? And this diagram, this particular map used to look very different a few years ago. So that itself shows how progress has been happening in this space. And you can see that the US and China are dark green here. And of course, India is light green, but at least I'm happy that it's not the lightest green, and it is still, a lot of progress is happening. And then almost a lot of the major countries in the world have their programs for quantum communication. And the last announcement of the highest number of qubits was 127 qubits by IBM. And there were some announcements about 200 qubits plus by some smaller companies. But I think IBM's roadmap is pretty interesting. They're talking about 1,000 qubit computers soon. And then by 2025, they're talking about 4,000 qubits. One thing to remember that everything that we are listening of and understanding and seeing in today's context is actually mostly computers which are not error free, right? So we're in the noisy intermediate scale quantum era, NISQ as it is called. And those are the devices that we are seeing here. Nothing is error free. And different kinds of, trapped ion circuits, spin quantum dot, cold, neutral or helium atom based technology, NV diamond based systems. In fact, now they're realizing that the NV diamond based systems are, turning out to be more useful for sensors, right? So there's a shift happening in the industry to use them for sensors rather than think of them as mainstream computing. And then of course, Microsoft is focusing on something very exotic called the topological qubit, right? And so on. And a lot of these companies are trying to come up with stacks, which I think is the part that everybody seems to be more familiar with, right? In terms of, because that's what you immediately interface with as a software programmer. What's happening on the security side, we have, and on the 5th of July this year, NIST, National Institute of Standards Associated with Technologies, NIST in the US, they announced the candidates for standardization, algorithm called Crystal Kyber for public key encryption as a substitute for RSA, and for digital signatures, a couple of alternates, right, are available. And of course, there are other algorithms that are being tried and tested by the industry, academia, etc., to see how that can move forward. Then quantum readers, various kinds of sensors that are used, geosensors, medical sensors for medical diagnostics. Diagnostics is an area which is likely to get impacted a lot with newer sensors, quantum sensors coming in, and so on. And then, of course, all kinds of use cases, right? Very important thing to remember is that quantum chemistry is a much more advanced space, right? In quantum, primarily because you can simulate molecules with very few qubits in a quantum computer. And it is almost impossible to simulate them with the current classical systems that we have, because they just, the computational power required is just too massive. So you don't want to just simulate molecules, you want to simulate a molecular reaction or a chemical reaction, right? So that has more hope and more promise on the quantum computing side. And in fact, a lot of POCs have already been done with some molecules. And so this is a very, very promising area, a lot of use cases which are coming up and will come up in the future in this space. Drug discovery, which is why we have so many startups in drug discovery, because of the promise of quantum chemistry. A very interesting use case is quantum, something very recently in the UK, there's a company which came up with a quantum gravity gradiometer, which which can detect stuff from the ground for, beneath the surface. And this could mean so many things, right? All infrastructure companies, when they do land surveys, etc. And when you're looking at, what is under the land, and when for geological systems, when you want to understand what's happening, all of these scenarios, these sensors could be very useful. And these algorithms you are familiar with, this is a laundry list of all the various kinds of standardization efforts that are happening in quantum. You don't have to need this slide because you go to the IEEE website, the most of the P something something are the IEEE standardization efforts. And if you go to the IEEE quantum website, and there you look for standards, this is the list that will come up over there, right? Then you have to go to ITU and you get the rest of the list. And then of course, there are other places where you will see lists like in ISO and so on. But at a high level, you pretty much get a good idea of what's happening. That's it from my side. I mean, I'm happy to answer any very specific questions if you have. And what time is it? Completely lost track of time.
It's 8:15 now.
Yeah.
So we have one question from JDA. So he's one of my batchmate actually. So what is the realistic error correction % we can expect in the near future? Let's say in the 10 years time.
I have no idea. I'm not the expert on that.
Okay. And there is some discussion that's going on related to various efforts which is going on. So we have in India a thriving quantum computing community. So you have referred IEEE quite a few times. So is there any in IEEE itself we can join the society or something like that we can do from that particular angle?
You want to join what?
No, I'm talking about there is a concentrated efforts going on in the IEEE itself for
the standards. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you can just throw some more light on that particular part, ma'am.
So I think all of these standards, the way they work is that you have to be an IEEE member first of all to participate in the standards, and then you express interest to be part of the standards. Now, traditionally, IEEE always used to involve organizations in the standards process because then there was a much more systematic, for whatever reasons, right? But for quantum, I know because right now, individuals are also being considered for some of the quantum related. So you can become an individual member and then go ahead and express interest in being part of those standard groups. There's usually a mailing list that you become a part of, and then they have periodic meetings where you become part of the discussions. As the standards discussions mature, there is usually an associated open source project effort that starts getting affiliated with that for people who want to experiment and try out any aspects of the new standard. But usually there's a lot of time that is spent in arriving at standardized aspects of depending on which standard we're talking about, right? So that's if you want to be participating in the IEEE standards, go ahead and become an IEEE member, and then go to the standards website and express interest to join, and you can take it from there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Yadav, would you like to ask any particular question?
Yes, ma'am. So I have a few questions related to hackathon itself, since this session was more focused for that, right? So we have seen the multiple people, they would be working on tech side and building some platform or building some solution. And recently, while going through LinkedIn, I came across one more website from India where they are building a resource pool to publish quantum related articles, QHive or something it's being called. So if someone is coming with those kind of ideas, like a specific project just for the quantum, as QCI is, right? Already we are trying to build in that space, like a separate space for posting the job, posting the content, inviting the speakers, hosting the conferences in collaboration with academia industry. So such kind of platform ideas will be also accepted in this hackathon, or it's just tech focused towards quantum side?
No, yes, they will be accepted, but you have to have a clear differentiator because, in the last 2-3 years, many entities have sprung up, right? And some of them just disappeared.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to understand what exactly you'll be doing. Are you going to boil the ocean? If you boil the ocean, you can boil the ocean. Like QETCI is literally trying to do everything, right? Like we're not doing everything at the same time, but we have a yearly plan. But we are focusing on the Indian ecosystem very seriously, right? And we are working closely with the government as well. But we are able to do that because of we have strategized it. We are bringing in very large companies and the power that they bring to move things forward, right? And we're also partnering with the academia. We have sort of got the right kind of lot of research was done into saying, okay, who should be the international advisors, who should be the national level advisors, and stuff like that. So similarly, for the kind of effort that, for example, that you're doing in Quantum Computing India, right? I mean, you have a vibrant community, and I think the focus seems to be more about disseminating knowledge, and that seems to be working well. So as long as there is a clear plan on what the entity is going to do, and the strategy behind is clearly outlined, it has every chance of moving to the next stage.
Thanks, ma'am. So anyone else is having any other questions there? Please, you can unmute yourself and ask to Reena, ma'am. Okay, I think most of the questions were already being asked during the session itself. So once again, I would encourage everyone to participate in the hackathon. I have already shared the link in the chat. I'm going to post that once again. If you're facing any difficulties, you can ping us on WhatsApp group, or you can email us, like whatever works for you. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. So this is not just a normal hackathon. I've been part of many hackathons and have been organizing also few. So the way in which this hackathon has been structured, it's very different. It helps you in establishing your own company or open sourcing your project, whatever you're going to work on. So I think it will be a good platform for people in India and from other part of the world as well to get started with a quantum, especially for the people who are developing around, like from where to start, from where to get the help. So this will can be a good kick start for you to make most out of it. Okay. And apart from that, And if I talk about this one, so if anyone of you are not part of QCI, you can just go and sign up here. So we are trying to build a knowledge ecosystem in India and hosting several workshops, fellowships, and hackathons. And there are a few built-in pipeline where you can be part of the community, share the knowledge with each other. That's how we have learned and grown so far. And Anshul sir is from CEBT. He's also doing the work in the same space and trying to look at the emerging business technology at Christ University. So if you have not explored this, you can check out the LinkedIn page. And there's an upcoming conference as well in collaboration with IEEE, where you can just register your papers if you're working on some research and all. So we have a quantum track as well in this. So these are the few of the announcements. And once again, thanks a lot, for agreeing to take up this session. I understand it's very difficult for you to take time from a busy schedule, and still you agreed to do a session with us and share the knowledge about this hackathon and the quantum ecosystem in India with everyone.
Sure, no, I'm happy to do such sessions, especially because if I can encourage a few people working on these projects to submit their projects and take them forward, right? I think that would be great.
Yeah. So me and Anshul sir, we already registered and we're planning to do see what ideas we can submit and work on.
All right, great.
When we talked, that was very interesting for me. Okay, I have the chance to learn from the person who's organizing this.
Yeah. I mean, everybody. I unfortunately we cannot. Otherwise, everybody is because I'm part of the organizing committee, but everybody else is should submit. It's got nothing to do with the just, and by the way, just one important piece of information, from undergrad students to experienced professionals, anybody can participate, even startups can participate, as long as they've not got round one funding. So if they're pre-seed or seed stage startups, they can participate. Because we are looking at helping them get seed stage funding, right? Somebody who's already got pre-seed funding, but is looking for seed funding also, we are allowing to participate. But not startups which have already matured to, round one funding. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am, definitely. So yeah, guys, once again, go to this link if you have not registered so far. Whoever is interested, you can share it on LinkedIn among your network, through WhatsApp, through groups, wherever you're part of, or whichever community you're part of, and encourage people to participate and work and explore this new tech, because this is going to be the future of computation for certain field, not for everything, as it has been discussed multiple times before as well. So yeah, that's it from my side, and thanks Anshul sir for being the
Thank you,
co-host
ma'am.
along with me.
It's a pleasure talking to you, and thanks Yadav for inviting me to host this session.
Yeah, and thank you very much for facilitating this session, both of you, and then Shadav, especially for the quickness with which you responded and then took the trouble to organize this session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, ma'am. It was a pleasure having you for our meetup.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Arpita, we just ended right now. So we will post the video on YouTube channel where you can rewatch the recordings.
Shadav, I think we can end the session now.